Hey everyone, it's Erin of Counter Read, joined by Brandon, also of Counter Read. As you notice, this is just a couple of days delayed, just a busy week all around. But here we are for your pre-Nebraska Michigan State preview. It's depending on when you watch this. Hopefully, it's before the game has played. If it's after, take everything with a grain of salt. But at this point that we are recording, Nebraska is about a day out from facing Michigan State on the road, has an opportunity to do something it hasn't done in a long time, since 2016, and that is to go 4 games, be on a 4-game win streak, but also to become bowl eligible. So there's a lot riding on this game. We do have a question from last week we will get to, but let's just preview this game first and foremost. Brandon, you've written a couple of things about what to expect for this matchup. For somebody who's like, give it to me in the most basic terms, what do we need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, Michigan State's an interesting one. This was a game where, according to power ratings, which I start looking at in the spring, and like inferring lines from them, like Nebraska was never like favored in this game or expected to be favored in this game. But here we are, game week, and they are. Michigan State's lost 6 in a row. Nebraska, as you referenced, is on a 3-game winning streak at the moment. And the Spartans they're kind of a tough one to figure. I kind of had a tough time with this week's preview because they've played well fairly recently. They had a lead on Rutgers. They played Iowa pretty tough, and then while they jumped out to a lead against Minnesota a week ago. Just haven't quite been able to get it done. They've kind of faded in the fourth quarter of games. Nebraska under Matt Rule really prides itself on kind of winning the second half, specifically the fourth quarter. So I think that's something important to watch. But like a lot of the games Nebraska has played this season, it has an edge defensively. This Michigan State offense isn't moving the ball with ease, but neither is Nebraska. So you kind of flip it around, and Michigan State can play a bit of defense still. It's not eye popping in a lot of respects, but they do a good job of limiting big plays. And those have kind of become pretty important to Nebraska as the offense has, well, dealt with an extraordinary number of injuries, but also kind of struggled to move the ball just really consistently. They've needed some of those big plays, particularly in the pass game. So I think that might be the key area to watch for me on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm going to be, I mean, I looked at the weather just because I think sometimes weather can play a factor into what we're going to see. And it's going to be a pretty nice fall game day in East Lansing, about like mid 50s, nothing like overly concerning as far as wind. So, like those things can have an effect on running, passing, everything else. I think it's going to be about as nice as you can get for an early November game in East Lansing. So I think this sets itself up well to allow Matt Rule and the staff to do whatever it is that they want to do without having to factor in too many extra elements into it. When you're looking at rain or potentially snow or other things as we get into the back half of any Big Ten schedule, you start to have to think about those things. This is kind of giving Nebraska an opportunity to just play the game it wants to. I do think that this is a really interesting question, which leads to this is last week, which this question came just after we had recorded our video, was James White wanted to know what a realistic ceiling for Heinrich Haarberg is. And I actually think when we're discussing this offense, that's a great question. Basically, James wants to know if he's good enough to be the starter if Nebraska wants to contend for the West, and then ultimately not get embarrassed by a Michigan, Ohio State, he even threw Oregon in there for the future of the Big Ten and looking into 2024 and beyond. So that's a really interesting question because we definitely know now that Nebraska is sticking with Heinrich Haarberg. Like all of our questions that we had in previous weeks of do we think we'll see Jeff Sims or what could be the next step with Jeff Sims can kind of be put to rest unless, something were to happen with Heinrich, which knock on wood doesn't. But I'm curious, Brandon, what you think the ceiling is for Heinrich is. At least let's just break it down right now. Let's not even look into future seasons because I think that starts to get into an off season and everything else and like who they go recruit. Let's just look at that ceiling for 2023.
Yeah, I mean, is he good enough to help Nebraska win the West, which doesn't exist beyond this season? Yeah, I think he is. Like Nebraska's right there, and you can kind of look at the remaining opponents they have, other than Tua Tagovailoa next week for Maryland. Like, is there a QB that is better than him? Wisconsin's playing his backup right now. Iowa's playing his backup for the rest of the season. So that's kind of a starting point for that. I think on a little bit longer time frame. So I looked up Harburg's QBR, which is ESPN's proprietary metric, as Bo Pelini used to say. It's nothing magical. It's not a magic number, but I do like it because it incorporates rushing and passing into one QB metric. And Harburg's is at 46.2, which is 10th in the Big Ten. I also like QBR because the scale is 0 to 100, and it's meant to kind of equate with a winning percentage. So if you're a QBR, if your QBR is 60, you should be, according to this model, winning 60% of your games. Now we know Harburg he's 5-1 as a quarterback, so he's doing better than 46.2%. But looking back at sort of Matt Rule, and I mean, here's a trivia question. That Matt Rule's two best seasons were his last two, his last season at Baylor, his last season at Temple. Name the quarterbacks in those. I couldn't without looking it up. Charlie Brewer, quarterback to Baylor in 2019 for that team that almost won the Big 12 championship game. His QBR was 69.2. PJ Walker, quarterbacked the Temple team that won the American Athletic Conference in 2016. His QBR was 60.9. I think those are doable numbers with Harburg long term. He's not going to get there this season, but if he is to be Nebraska's quarterback of the future, I think it's possible. He's got a ways to go. The other thing about this is like, what would his number be if Nebraska had a wide receiving core? They have receivers, of course. I'm not trying to slight anybody currently on the team, but it's a totally different group than what they expected to have and what you would expect to have in a more typical season. So there's that piece of it. Like, I think the nice thing in looking at this question, which was very good and might be worth an off-season post later on, was Matt Rule's teams have not been the teams when they're winning that need like excellent quarterback play. So I think it puts it within the range of what's possible for Harburg. Maybe not probable, but possible.
Yeah, I think, and we've said this in the past, we've said this last week honestly, I feel like a bit of a broken record at this point, but it's bears repeating that Nebraska, for all it's really been handed this season, has really been making the most of what it has. And that's great when you think of like the long-term potential of what Matt Rule can do, because even looking at what he said this week, this Nebraska team is ahead of where his first two seasons at Baylor and Temple were at. And so I think the thing with like Heinrich Harburg was he who Matt Rule and Marcus Satterfield expected to be their quarterback through this whole season? And the answer is no. You don't go and get Jeff Sims and really make Jeff Sims the guy, ultimately leading to the departure of Casey Thompson, if you think your starting quarterback is Heinrich. It's not a slight at Heinrich at all. It's just, that's not what you do. And I think where Nebraska is at right now with a lighter wide receiver room, which we could talk about endlessly and don't need to keep reminding people of that, but like through all of the injuries, through all of the areas that lack depth, Nebraska is finding a way to get what it needs to do to win. It's just getting what it needs to get. I don't know how to say that more succinctly than that. It's just doing what it needs to do. And I think that if you are a Nebraska fan looking to the question of like the ceiling, not even for Harburg, honestly, but for this whole team, when you're looking at, Oregon coming into the Big Ten and Washington, you have to feel pretty good about the future, knowing you don't want to look too far ahead, but like this is Nebraska almost outperforming its own play to a degree, where we have a lot of time in the off season to dive into this, but I think they're all exceeding their ceilings to a degree right now. I don't know if that makes any sense to people, but I think where we would have maybe put some ceilings, like say for Harvard or others a month ago, they're exceeding beyond it. It doesn't like it. Again, I'm just a broken record, but it's worth just enjoying the ride because this team seemingly has figured out how to just play for each other and play for itself. There's a reason everyone gets so excited when the new videos drop from Matt Rule, and it's the "if we die, we die," and it's the these quotes that he has, and it's because I believe these rooms, this room of players, truly believes in what they are doing right now. So some of this is like almost like when you talk about doing an off-season evaluation of this, it'll be really, really fascinating. But some of it is almost like unquantifiable to a degree where I'm like not even sure at times how to attach numbers to some of the things that they are accomplishing, because in some ways it defies logic. It defies like all of the things that we would have put. Like if we did a season preview, which everyone did, you're not making sense of this right now. But here they're about to go into Michigan State and potentially become bowl eligible for the first time in 7 years. So I think I saw Tom Chattel say this, where it was like, just enjoy the ride. And I really appreciated that because it is true. No matter if you're a Nebraska fan or just, watching the video because you want to know what we think, it is worth just enjoying the ride. This is the beauty of sports, is that anything can happen on any given Sunday, Saturday, you name it. But I'm excited for I'm excited to see what comes of this. I imagine the locker room video we get from a win will be pretty significant if Nebraska becomes bowl eligible.
Yeah, I think so. You referenced the videos. The videos are great. That's another thing kind of on my list for once we don't have weekly football games. That's probably worth writing about at Counter Read. But yeah, like the celebrations after every win always look pretty great. So I can only imagine what this one would be. I mean, you're right; they're absolutely exceeding expectations. They're kind of getting by, in my opinion, with like the most base level thing you can do, which is like, let's just be a strong team. Their preseason win total, I think, was 6.5 most places. However you felt about that in, say, June, like, how would you feel about it? Where would that number go if we could tell you what we know now, which is one, okay, the defense is going to be better than you think. But you're going to lose 3 starting wide receivers, essentially. You're going to lose your top 2 running backs. And oh, by the way, Heinrich Haarberg is going to probably start all but 2 games this year. And not because Jeff Sims is lost for the season. Would your expectation have come down from, say, 6 or 7 wins? It probably would have for me. And Nebraska has a great shot to get number 6 on Saturday.
I mean, I'm the person that said that this was a 5-7 team, even just a few weeks ago. And the way I explained it to people was, if I'm wrong, great. Like, honestly, that is an area where I would rather, like, I am never upset when I'm wrong in that regard. All I was asking was that I needed Nebraska to show me something to be able to get myself beyond what I thought was like looking to be a potentially 5-7 season. Now, when I was talking 5-7, it still had a ton of potential. That's still an improvement. There's still areas where you could say Nebraska's taken a step forward, but to get to that 6-game win mark, I needed Nebraska to show me something that it has now at this point. It has shown me, we talked about it last week, the proof of concept. This is a team that believes in what it is doing. It believes in what Matt Rule is putting forward. And so that is the biggest slice of humble pie to me, to be wrong on that. At this point, I feel very confident this is a 6-win team, if not potentially 7-win team. Heck, who knows what this team could do at this point. But I feel very comfortable saying this is a bowl eligible team. And I wasn't comfortable saying that a month ago. So yeah, when you think about what this team has done and what Heinrich has been able to do, it hasn't been perfect. It hasn't been pretty. They've been clear. They're not changing his arm motion at this point. They're not changing things about him, but they're going to work within them. They're going to work to find ways to make him and everybody they have available successful. And that starts with the defense being utilized to truly keep this team in keep it in games and be effective, and not having the defense get frustrated if they have to go back out on the field quicker because the offense loses the ball. Now, they did say they worked on fumbles, so we'll see. I did appreciate Matt Rule basically saying, hey, everyone, we just didn't coach that well, so we worked on it this week, but we'll see. Regardless, this is not a team that seems to be pointing fingers and blame outside of like Matt Rule takes everything on himself. He says it's my fault, but everybody else is very cohesively like, we are working together. I think that's a big part of it. Again, you can't quantify that, but it's sometimes like capturing lightning in a bottle, and it's going to end up being special in some regards. And I think that's what's exciting about, I'm excited to watch Nebraska play against Michigan State. It feels like there's a ton of potential here, and I hope fans are just enjoying it as well. I don't even know where more to go with that. I think if you're looking for a preview for tomorrow's game, you can head to counterread.com, read everything that Brandon has shared so far this week, but also just like settle in and hopefully be able to enjoy what should be a pretty good game overall. Both Michigan State wants to be the spoiler. They say they don't want to, but they want to be the spoiler. Nebraska wants to keep its win streak in check. That's the beauty. Here's Big Ten football. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, particularly in November. It already feels like it's been a wild Big Ten season. I mean, we've seen crazier things than Nebraska losing 4 straight games, so that could happen. But I think Nebraska's going to a bowl game, and that's maybe people were expecting that, maybe they weren't. We've already talked through that piece of it, but here's big picture. That means they're going to come out of this season with momentum. And, we don't need to get into the 2024 schedule, which was released this week, but quick glance at that. It is a schedule that is good early for a team that has some momentum. It's up to Nebraska to maintain that over 8 months. We saw with the 2019 season that Nebraska team was expected to take the jump and didn't. But it'll be different though, because this 2023 team has the chance, if they make a bowl game, like they're going to be a team that is on people's radar, and that's it's been a while since Nebraska's been in that spot.
Yeah, it really has been. And so bless everyone's patience. We would love to have you, though, join us as we discuss all of this. Head to counterread.com, become a subscriber. You can become a free subscriber and work. We'll work to earn your trust and like you wanting to be potentially a paid subscriber down the road. But you can also subscribe to this YouTube channel. We'll have a post-game reaction tomorrow as well. And we'll just dive into all of that good stuff, including having Matt Rule's post-game video will be here on this YouTube channel as well. So again, just like, subscribe, head to counterread.com, do the same thing, like and subscribe. Brandon, I appreciate your time. It's been a bit of a crazy week. We'll be back on a more normal schedule next week, knock on wood. But hey, we're just working on stuff. So head to counterread.com. It'll be worth it.
Thanks for having me.